Well, private homeowners in Singapore who sell their properties within 4 years of buying them will now have to pay a seller stamp duty up from the previous 3-year period. The government says it's aimed at tackling a sharp increase of people flipping their properties within a short period of owning them, especially of new homes not even built yet. The rules apply to private properties bought from today. And SSD rates will also be increased by 4 percentage points for all holding periods. For instance, right now, those selling their homes within a year of owning it will have to pay 16% of the actual selling price or market value. That's up from the previous SSD of 12%. Those selling after more than 4 years of owning won't have to pay the duty. The SSD is meant to curb short-term speculation and keep the private property market stable. It does not apply to those in public housing. Now, for more analysis on this, we have Alan Cheong, Executive Director for Research and Consultancy at Savills Singapore. Alan, thanks for your time today. So the announcement there mentioned that there's a sharp jump in private property transactions with short holding periods. Could you explain to us what this is trying to achieve?
Well, the policy is trying, like what they said, to cut down on those who had that windfall after buying a property and flipping it. Now, why did they have the windfall was because the private residential prices underwent a step function. From the period 2017 to 2019, it was pretty flat. And just after COVID, when the relaunches came or the new launches came, it gapped up. So when you gap up, naturally, those who bought into the 2018, 2019 period would have a windfall gain. And because of that profit, they will naturally flip.
I see. So can you tell us more about this trend of flipping properties? Are those behind this more locals or foreigners? And how are they able to flip properties when they already have to hold on to these properties for a few years?
Well, I think it's most of them are Singaporeans. The majority of buyers of new launches are Singaporeans. And why they can flip is when the developer gets the permit to launch, it's usually about 15 to 18 months after they get the site. And they still have a couple of years more before they reach completion. And just before completion, another new project gets launched. And this time around, the prices gapped up in the market. And you can't tell when it gaps up. Well, every couple of years, it gaps up one level. And those who bought, fortunately or fortuitously for them, they see that massive gap up and they are holding on to a windfall profit, they will flip. That's the reason why they are doing that. Not if prices were pretty flat, they probably wouldn't flip so early, at least.
I see. So they're making the most of, I guess, the price in the market. So what do you think will be the impact of the recent announcement on the overall property market?
For people who buy to stay or for investors, it wouldn't have much of an impact. They would still want the property to complete, and that will go past the 4 years SSD. And then what would happen is that for those projects that people buy to flip, I think they will have a problem trying to, justify why they need to buy. And the narrative of some of these agents would have lost that point that they could buy for the short term and then flip after a couple of years.
Yeah, so if these sellers before today made money in the private market, then they would have funds to pay for public housing at higher prices. So now, what do you think will be the impact on HDB prices now?
Well, it may delay the influx of buyers into the HDB flat market, but I guess is this: if currently the prices are pretty flat and then if it lasts for another 3 to 4 years, then you may not have a case where they will flip that early, even without the SSD. But if you have a case where you have prices rising rapidly, then this impact would have a positive spillover effect onto the HDB market and cause HDB resale prices. So it's an indirect attack on the HDB price increase.
So, Alan, where do you see prices heading for the public and the private property markets here in Singapore for the rest of the year?
I think for the private market, we are still thinking that it will head up towards about 7% this year on year, and HDB prices probably about 5-6% increase this year. This effect would probably only take, have bite towards the end of this year and thereafter.
Yeah, and will there be any impact to the en bloc property sales, Alan?
Well, the en bloc property sales have this really suffering its own, own dynamics and economics in that the sellers are asking for too high a price that the developers would rather buy government land sales than to take on a collective sales project. And what's left on the table now are collective sales of projects that are pretty large. And the developers are looking at the high price that they need to pay and the number of units need to sell. They may not find it that attractive. So they rather go for government land sales projects that yield between 300 to 600 units, which is more palatable.
I see. Alan, appreciate your insights today. Alan Cheong there, Executive Director for Research and Consultancy at Savills Singapore.